Have you ever wondered why some ideas shake us so deeply they make our very soul uncomfortable? What's worse, facing an uncomfortable truth, or living forever inside a comforting illusion? Now imagine someone looking at the world and saying, everything you believe in is fragile. It's an illusion, and it's already falling apart. That person was Friedrich Nietzsche. Why do his words still sting today? Is it because they drag us out of our comfort zone, or because deep down they expose how vulnerable we really are, like standing on shaky ground with nothing solid to hold on to? So let me ask you, was Nietzsche wrong? Or did he know something the rest of us are too afraid to admit? Here's the thing about great thinkers: sometimes they fear being fully understood more than they fear being misinterpreted. Nietzsche is the perfect example. Few philosophers in history provoke reactions like he does. He's been loved, hated, misquoted, idolized, and demonized. His ideas influenced everything from art to ethics, from psychology to existentialism. Yet every time his name comes up, debates ignite. Why? Because Nietzsche is a mirror. What you see in him often reveals more about you than about him. And today, we're going to step into that fire. We'll face his most controversial ideas, the criticisms they sparked, and ask, were those criticisms fair or just distortions? Let's start with what made Nietzsche infamous. His assault on traditional morality. You've probably heard of his concept of slave morality. In books like Beyond Good and Evil and On the Genealogy of Morals, Nietzsche wasn't asking which moral system is correct. No, he went deeper. He asked, why do we hold these values at all? Where did they come from? What hidden motives gave birth to them? And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Nietzsche argued that much of what we call Christian morality, and by extension the modern idea of equality, wasn't born from strength but from weakness. It wasn't the victorious writing the rules, it was the powerless. Think about that for a second. What if kindness, humility, and compassion weren't pure virtues, but clever strategies of the powerless to restrain the powerful? Nietzsche began with a fascinating observation. When he studied ancient cultures, Greek, Roman heroic traditions, he noticed something striking. They celebrated strength, pride, ambition, courage. Achilles, for example, would never say, I am a sinner seeking redemption. Instead, he would declare, I choose glory because I have the power and skill to seize it. But then came Christianity, and suddenly the script flipped. Now humility, pity, meekness, and self-denial were elevated as the highest virtues. Nietzsche called this the birth of slave morality. To him, it wasn't an innocent moral revolution. It was resentment disguised as virtue, a way for the weak to get revenge on the strong by making their strength look like a sin. So here's the burning question. Was Nietzsche exposing a truth we'd rather not face, that our morality is built on resentment? Or was he simply tearing down the very values that keep society from falling apart? Because if he was right, it means everything you've been taught about good and evil may be upside down. But this was only the beginning. Nietzsche had a name for this moral revolution, the transvaluation of values. He argued that what we call morality today, especially Christian morality, was born from resentment. The powerless couldn't win with strength, so they won with strategy. They turned pride into sin and weakness into virtue. Power, ambition, self-sufficiency. Once celebrated as noble, now condemned as selfish. Sacrifice, submission, forgiveness. Once seen as signs of defeat, now exalted as holy. Nietzsche didn't see this as progress. He saw it as decline. Humanity, in his view, traded greatness for safety, creativity for conformity, so he issued a challenge. It's time to move beyond this morality of weakness. It's time to create new values, values that celebrate strength, creativity, and self-overcoming. But here's the question, was Nietzsche calling us back to the brutal morality of ancient warriors? Or was he urging us to build something entirely new? Even today, his writings leave the answer open. Of course, not everyone was impressed. Some were horrified. Leo Tolstoy saw Nietzsche's proposal as dangerous, a direct threat to the very foundation of human society. For Tolstoy, the idea of love your neighbor as yourself wasn't just a nice moral guideline. It was the cornerstone of justice, the glue that held civilization together. Remove it, and society collapses. Dostoevsky raised a darker question: if we throw away Christian morality, what's left of humanity itself? He feared that without compassion, forgiveness, and humility, we wouldn't rise, we'd descend into chaos. And here's where things get even more uncomfortable. Nietzsche admired men like Napoleon, people who bent history to their will, often at the expense of others. For him, these figures embodied greatness. For us, they often look like tyrants. So who was right? Were Tolstoy and Dostoevsky protecting the fragile balance of human society? Or was Nietzsche exposing a moral illusion that chains us down? This is where you come in. Ask yourself, are the values you live by truly yours, or just hand-me-downs from a morality designed to keep you small? Would you dare to build your own values, even if it meant breaking away from what you've been taught is good? Nietzsche forced us to look at morality in a way that feels unsettling. But morality wasn't the only battlefield he stepped into. Next, he aimed straight at the heart of society's greatest pillar, religion. And when he declared God is dead, he didn't just shock the world, he left behind a question that still haunts us today. So, what did Nietzsche really mean? You've probably heard Nietzsche's most famous line, "God is dead," and we have killed him. Over the years, it's been shouted like a battle cry by some atheists, and mourned like a funeral hymn by others. Some took it as a celebration. Finally, we're free from religion. Others saw it as a tragic warning. Without God, we're doomed to chaos. But Nietzsche's real meaning, much deeper, much darker. When he said God is dead, he wasn't talking about a literal God. He was talking about the decline of religious belief in Europe, the collapse of Christianity as the unquestioned foundation of morality and meaning. And he wasn't cheering. He was asking, what happens next? For centuries, religion gave people purpose, direction, and a moral compass. Whether you agreed with it or not, it anchored society. Now imagine pulling that anchor up. No more certainty. No more divine guarantee of right and wrong. That's what Nietzsche saw. And instead of celebrating, he asked a terrifying question. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, console ourselves? In other words, if we've destroyed the foundation of our values, who or what will guide us now? Nietzsche saw two possibilities. One was bleak nihilism. With no higher values, people could sink into despair, distraction, or empty pleasure. Hedonism, chaos, even the worship of new false idols, money ideology, nationalism. But the other path was far more powerful. Some, he believed, could face the void with courage. Instead of collapsing, they could create new values, new meanings crafted by their own will. He called these rare individuals the Übermenschen, the overmen or supermen. Not superheroes in the comic book sense, but people strong enough to live without borrowed beliefs, people who build their own. Now, don't mistake Nietzsche for a simple religion hater. His criticism ran deeper than that. He saw religion as one form of the same problem, blind obedience. Accepting a ready-made system of values instead of forging your own. That's why he also criticized secular dogmas, like those who worship science as if it answers every question of meaning, or those who hide behind nationalism and race as if identity can replace individuality. For Nietzsche, any system, religious or not, that stopped you from creating your own values was a cage, and he wanted you to break free. But here's the twist. Nietzsche admitted that religion, even with all its flaws, was still better than nothing. Why? Because absolute emptiness, pure nihilism, is unbearable. If you don't create values, you get swallowed by the void. So he left us with a dilemma. What about those who can't create their own values? Would they end up following the values of the strong? And if so, wouldn't that just become a new religion in disguise? That's the paradox. Nietzsche never fully resolved. And maybe that's why his words still haunt us today. But Nietzsche didn't stop there. He went even deeper into the human psyche. He asked, what really drives us? What's the force beneath every action, every choice, every dream? And his answer was one of his most controversial ideas ever. He called it the will to power. If there's one idea that captures Nietzsche's daring vision of human nature, it's this, the will to power. But here's the catch. Nietzsche never gave us a neat definition. At times, he described it as a simple desire to feel powerful. Other times, as self-mastery. And in his later writings, he hinted it was something even bigger, a principle that runs through all of life itself. So, what was he really saying? At its core, Nietzsche believed the will to power is the driving force behind everything we do. More than pleasure, more than survival, more than happiness. Pleasure fades, happiness comes and goes, but the hunger to grow, to expand, to overcome, that's deeper. That's the heartbeat of life itself. Of course, critics pounced on this idea. They claimed Nietzsche was glorifying domination, that life is nothing but a brutal competition for control. Read him shallowly, and it almost looks that way. He often praised figures like Napoleon, celebrating their ability to bend history to their will. And yes, Nietzsche had little patience for people who gave up on shaping their own destiny. But if you stop there, you miss the essence. Because Nietzsche's power wasn't just about conquering others, it was about conquering yourself. Think of it like this. There are two kinds of power. External power, the power to shape the world around you, lead armies, build empires, write history. Internal power, the power to master yourself, to channel your impulses, your pain, your chaos into something higher. Nietzsche admired both, but the second, the inner power, was what he valued most. That's why he celebrated not just conquerors, but creators, artists like Leonardo da Vinci, thinkers like Goethe, visionaries who turned raw passion into timeless beauty. Here's where it all comes together. For Nietzsche, the ultimate expression of inner strength was something he called amor fati, the love of fate. Imagine this: instead of wishing life were easier, you embrace it exactly as it is. Every joy, every heartbreak, every failure, every triumph. You don't just accept your struggles, you learn to love them because they shape you. That's what Nietzsche meant when he said, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." It wasn't a cliché. It was a philosophy of turning pain into power. So here's the real challenge. Nietzsche left us with the battlefield is not out there, it's in here. The greatest victory isn't defeating someone else. It's uniting the warring parts of yourself into one powerful whole. When you do that, even your deepest suffering can become fuel for creativity, meaning, and strength. And that's the essence of the will to power, not brute force, but transformation. But if Nietzsche's vision of power was about strength and creativity, how did it get twisted into something ugly? Something linked with fascism, racism, and hate? The answer lies in a story of betrayal, and it begins with his own family. If you've ever heard Nietzsche's name linked to fascism, or even Hitler, you're not alone. But here's the truth. That connection was a distortion, a betrayal of his philosophy. And the betrayal came from someone shockingly close, his own sister Elizabeth. Elizabeth married a man who was a fierce anti-Semite, something Nietzsche openly despised. After Nietzsche's mental collapse, Elizabeth gained control of his works. What did she do? She twisted them. She edited his unpublished notes, delayed books that showed his rejection of nationalism, and packaged him as a prophet of German supremacy. She even courted Hitler's admiration. As a result, generations were misled into believing Nietzsche was a fascist sympathizer, when in fact he loathed nationalism, despised anti-Semitism, and mocked the very idea of racial superiority. Take one example, his phrase, "the blonde beast." Out of context, it sounds like a racial slogan, but Nietzsche wasn't talking about race. He was using a metaphor. He compared the noble spirit to a lion, fierce, independent, breaking free from old chains. On the genealogy of morals, he even used warriors from cultures as different as Arabs and Japanese samurai to illustrate the image. The blonde beast wasn't about bloodlines. It was about inner fire. What Nietzsche cared about wasn't race, nation, or tribe. It was the individual. He believed greatness could appear anywhere from anyone, regardless of origin. What mattered was whether you could rise above resentment, mediocrity, and conformity, whether you could live with courage and create your own path. If anything, Nietzsche despised herd mentality, whether in religion, politics, or national pride. That's why he broke with his sister, and even with Richard Wagner, once his close friend, over their anti-Semitism. And yet, despite all this, his sister's manipulation succeeded. The Nazis co-opted his words, stripped of nuance, and turned him into something he never was. It's one of history's cruelest ironies. A man who preached individuality and warned against blind obedience was repackaged as a prophet of collective obedience and blind hatred. But here's the thing, even beyond the distortions, Nietzsche left us with a tension that's still hard to swallow. He rejected equality as weakness, yet he despised racism. He glorified strength, yet he warned against domination. He was never simple, and that's exactly why he still challenges us. So the real question is this: how did Nietzsche want to be remembered? Nietzsche never wanted to be turned into an idol. He never wanted blind followers. In fact, he warned against it. In his later work, Ecce Homo, he practically begged his readers, "Do not follow me. Do not become my disciples. Find your own way." For him, the worst betrayal was to turn philosophy into another religion, another set of commandments. He didn't want to give you answers. He wanted to spark your courage to create your own. That's why he wrote in such a provocative, uncomfortable style. He wanted to shake you awake, not cradle you back to sleep. His challenge was clear. Question everything. Even me. And maybe that's why Nietzsche still divides us, because he doesn't let us rest in easy truths. He forces us to wrestle with the uncomfortable questions. Are your values truly yours, or are they inherited chains? Do you dare to live without a safety net of ready-made beliefs? Can you love your life with all its chaos and pain and still say yes to it? That is Nietzsche's ultimate lesson, not obedience but freedom. The freedom to think, to doubt, to build, to become more than what the world tells you to be. If you've made it this far, it says something about you. It means you're not afraid to confront difficult ideas even when they shake the ground beneath your feet. That restless spirit, that refusal to settle, that is exactly what Nietzsche believed could move the world forward. So carry this with you. Philosophy isn't just words in a book. It's the spark that pushes you to ask, what is truly mine? What do I want to create? And if this journey with Nietzsche stirred something in you, share your perspective in the comments. Because it's in dialogue, yours and mine, that ideas grow stronger. If you'd like to keep exploring, subscribe and join me for the next steps of this journey. Together, we'll keep questioning, keep digging, and keep discovering what makes life worth living.